Welcome, listeners, to the Grande Bouffe, the big feast with myself, Cole Smithey, and this week's guest co-host, Mr. Ted Rall.
Hi, Cole.
Hey, Ted.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good.
We are going to drink some GONZO Imperial Porter as our beverage of choice for this discussion of this fine Adam Curtis. It's a part of a BBC TV series, so it's only an hour-long documentary. And anyway, this wonderful Imperial Porter with Ralph Steadman's artwork on the label.
No, as a cartoonist, I've always wanted to do a beer label, and I have not. And now I have another reason to hate Ralph Steadman, aside from the fact that he used to hang out with Dr. Thompson. Wow, cool. I wonder if he did it for this.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
He does all of the Flying Dog
Is this
art.
from Colorado, as was Dr. Thompson?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to the question. It even quotes the good doctor on the beer. It never got weird enough for me. Hunter S. Thompson.
That's a good quote.
And yeah, but it's also a lie because it finally did get too weird for even the great Hunter S. Thompson.
I think the Reagan administration did him in.
He was in a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of physical and mental suffering,
And
sadly.
Yeah. Well, he was a weird dude. So, so I think, I've always wanted to know, what is an Imperial Porter mean that there's higher alcohol?
Higher ABV, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 9.2%. So let's taste this fine beverage. Cheers.
Cheers. That is a damn fine porter, and I like porters.
Yeah.
I know from porters. I have them a lot. So, it's one of my porters. One of my go-to beers. That and IPAs, and more than stouts. Stouts have never really. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll drink a stout, but they've never really done it for me that much. Porter's great, but this is really good. It's really no aftertaste, no bad nasty aftertaste so far. Very yummy. I hope you have a lot of that. That's good.
Okay, so we have many things to talk about. Should we let the cat out of the bag about a little website?
A little website? Oh no, let's not do that now.
Okay. All right. So
we're not ready to go.
Let's talk about
we'll tease.
Adam Curtis's All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, Love and Power episode of this 3-part BBC
Don't
documentary.
trip over the name. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's awful.
Like, what the hell?
BBC they have a lot of things that they really just don't get right. And one of the things that is this the first time you've seen an Adam Curtis documentary?
As far as I know, I mean, I may have seen. I didn't IMDb him. What else has he done that I might?
He did
have
The Power of Nightmares, which is a pretty groundbreaking BBC documentary that is all about 9/11 and that stuff. All right, so anyway, he has a very specific style, and it's easy to mock because it's very repetitive, and he phrases everything in a very editorial way. It's very opinionated, and so you just have to take that. You have to, that's the nature of the beast.
But what he's, but I would say accurate. I mean,
definitely.
Everything he talked about was stuff that I was familiar with, and I didn't have any what the fuck moments. I didn't have any moments where I was like, wait, that's not at all what happened.
But it's the kind of information that is not widely known.
True.
Not widely discussed.
Well, that's the problem, though.
Watched.
Because I'll tell you, first of all, I just want to say I thought it was great. I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and
I can't wait to talk about it.
We had some critiques. We had some critiques. But I think the big problem is, and I run into this with my own work, and I know you do too as a film critic, is that he presents things that are true in a way that assumes that you will simply accept them as being true without proving them necessarily.
Right.
He just says them. And unfortunately, most people who watch them are like, they're stuck in middle-brow, mainstream, corporate media, NPR, CBS, whatever, and New York Times, and they're just going to be like, I'm well-informed, I've never heard of this, this guy must be a crazy conspiracy nut.
Right.
But it's not true.
No, and that's the one thing that the cred that you get with the BBC is you can't just write him off as a crackpot because he's a BBC documentarian.
Yeah, they wouldn't have aired it if it wasn't carefully fact-checked and, they vetted it. BBC they don't run anything unless I think they will do stuff about American politics and economics that is controversial here because it's there. It's on the other side of the pond. They couldn't do something like this about the UK. We could, but they can't.
Right. So I really want to talk about there's a couple of theses that are going on in the film, and this unholy union between Ayn Rand and Alan Greenspan, which is just about the wackiest pairing. There's...
not really, though, because, if you... so the thesis really is, right? We were talking about this. The thesis is the world as we know it, the late 20th century and early 21st century American socioeconomics, social compact is the way that it is, which is to say laissez-faire capitalism at the expense of pretty much the 99% for the benefit of the 1%.
And the ecology. Mostly
because you can see it through the lens of the world is because of Ayn Rand and her influence on Alan Greenspan, the former long-time chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, and his influence on presidents of both parties. I think that's the thesis, fundamentally.
And it's very interesting when in the beginning they're talking about the CEOs for these big tech companies such as Oracle, and they're all big and Ayn Rand aficionados, fans. They're obsessed with Ayn Rand. And what got me, there's another documentary that I saw.
Yeah, they named their kids after her and after her book. The character,
so
like
culty.
John Galt in her book.
So you really get a window in on how a big part of our internet infrastructure is designed by a cult.
Well, by weird ass right wing sort of post-fascist libertarian types who don't believe, and this is the key takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Who are opposed to the idea of altruism. In other words, taking care of the poor and the downtrodden simply because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
She actually argues not only is that like a waste of your time, it's actually bad for society. Right. And that everybody should just simply pursue their own happiness, their own bliss, and fuck everyone else.
See,
that was Reaganism,
right? And it's fascism. This is a direct line between socialism.
Well, no, it's not fascism.
Okay.
Actually,
really?
Because with fascism,
it leads to it's a slippery slope.
There's a Venn diagram for sure between what she called objectivism and fascism.
Yeah.
In fascism, the individual sublimates his or her individuality for the benefit of the state. Like if the state, if a fascist state says, like for example, in Nazi Germany, on the night of the Long Knives, many of the victims went to their deaths shouting Heil Hitler while they were killed by Hitler because they thought that their own deaths would have meaning within the overall needs of the nation state and the Reich. So that's sublimating your individuality to the state, right? That's not, and of course you saw that in the Soviet Union under Stalin. That's not what objectivism is. Objectivism is just be selfish, live your best life, as Oprah would say. And if everyone does that, everything will just sort of work out magically for everyone else, including the downtrodden. Yeah. So it's kind of like corporatism on acid. It's individualism on acid.
Well, it's kind of nonsense. It is. But the thing, what shocks me is that it has been so embraced by people who were in positions of power, who were able to take this insanity and put it in a product. and call it capitalism and democracy and all the good little names that they call it. But what really struck me about Ayn Rand is she's a liar. She's an inveterate liar, and this
and a hypocrite.
And that's obvious. Look, I'm a hypocrite too. I admit to it, and I try and think about it a lot. The things that I'm most hypocritical.
We all are. It's the human condition.
But she's so shifty. She's literally, I hate using that word. I take that back. She's shifty. Her eyes she keeps looking down to the left, and that's a sign of a liar. Anytime you're watching somebody and they look down to the left, that means they're lying. Her eyes are always darting around. And let's not.
Look, I think she's psychologically traumatized, right? They don't even talk about this, and I've rarely read this.
I want to talk
about. She's Russian. She's
right,
from the former Soviet
right,
Union.
This is a key.
And she left during the worst times, during the Stalin times, right?
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that
and she's not the prettiest flower in the box.
No, she's not. She could be pretty soured. I mean, look, you can't blame anyone who lived through Stalin's purges for coming out thinking that communism is a pretty crappy system, right?
Sure.
So, it's kind of like the anti-Castro Cubans who are kind of a little psycho down there in Miami. Uh-huh. And she was a psycho, and she came out, and because she was a brilliant psycho, she was able to convince a lot of people that she had figured everything out. But I really wanted to. I have to sort of say, and having gone to an Ivy League school in the early '80s, I saw this kind of Ayn Rand cult. I mean, this is an archetype. You meet them, especially in the elites. I don't think you meet a lot of fountainhead geeks at the University of Kentucky at Louisville. You meet them at Harvard and Cornell and places like that. I went to Columbia, and I knew a lot of those guys, and it was a flirtation with not fascism as an ideology, but as a style. And
you certainly get all of the Wall Street greed is good formula early. That's Reaganism. This is what that is. And
Alan Greenspan served, I believe, from the early Reagan or late Carter administration, all the way through the Clinton years, and then also into George W. Bush.
Yeah, I really like.
He peaks out really under Clinton.
Yeah,
and that's his biggest influence.
I really liked how Curtis points out that the Clintons became these opportunists who just wanted to take whatever they could for themselves, and.
Well, there's an episode, there's a section that he talks about that to me is worth the entire price of admission of the hour, which is he talks about how Greenspan goes to Bill Clinton early on. Bill Clinton is, he has a mandate to make some radical change because it's been 12 years of Republican rule. Clinton has just come in. The country's excited. He's young. He came from one of the poorest states in the country. He only earned $35,000 a year as governor of Arkansas. And he's a working class guy who grew up in a trailer, right? So he obviously has some liberal instincts that he wants to promulgate. And Bill and Alan Greenspan waltzes in there like a character out of a Jean-Paul Sartre play and just tells him, no, little boy, that's not what it's going to be like at all. That you think you're going to have some anti-poverty programs? No, the deficit is too high. We can't afford any of that. No, you're going to cut the budget, which is, by the way, the exact opposite, as Paul Krugman could tell you, of what Keynesian economics tells you to do. John Maynard Keynes said, the British economist who influenced the FDR, said during the boom is when you have austerity. During the bust, that's when you have a stimulus. Bill Clinton,
it's such common sense,
came in not during a boom. He came in 1993, and it was still a recession for a good 3 more years. And the economy never really took off the way it could have because of this little conversation where Greenspan said, no, you can't do any of that. And Clinton, and he said, oh, wow, I can't believe Clinton went for it. Clinton announced that he was going to go for it. And, there's all these quotes. You can hear Clinton say it. I'd forgotten a lot of that. And it was oh, shit, yeah. Bill Clinton really was a nasty figure. He really was a right-winger. We forget that. I mean, he's got those sparkly, twinkly eyes, and even the Monica thing makes him look kind of cool.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, and 2020 hindsight, everyone will be, you are starting to hear more people say that about Obama, what a Republican he was.
Oh, yeah.
And
thank God. But I think it's still it's not widely known. It's one of those things.
So I think it's interesting to go back to the source material of the movie, how we got into this idiotic situation out of the writings of
this hack
of a sociopathic but highly intelligent woman who really just needed to get laid because her her whole thing, the way that her group what did they call themselves?
What was it called? Shit. Not the Coven. It's the
Ayn Rand version of the originalists.
Yeah,
it's very pragmatic, and they make everything, everything is logical and everything is rational. And I loved when the guy that she wanted to have the affair with, who she evidently he saw above the...
No, he did.
Oh, he did?
He did famously have the affair with her.
Yeah, he should, but he regretted it, obviously. And
he had to, and his wife had to sign off on it.
And the way that Ayn Rand led him into it was about how everything that she does is rational.
By definition.
Right.
It's like when Richard Nixon said, if the president does it, it's legal.
Exactly. So she's against religion, supposedly, and yet she uses that exact same Bible thumping routine that you see in Night of the Hunter.
Well, you just have to have faith, right? You're right. It's a cult. It's like
it's Jim Jones. It's a con. And so that's how she conned this guy.
It's circular reasoning
into boning her.
It's so funny for someone who claims to promulgate a philosophy called objectivism, as in objectivity.
Right.
That you use pure rationality. Look, human beings can't use pure rationality because they're human beings.
Well, let's get down to it. The difference, if you just want to draw a line on a piece of paper and say these are leftist values, leftist ideology, here's right-wing ideology. The first thing that you would have at the top of the page is right-wing ideology is greed. Everything for me and mine. I don't care where it comes from. I don't need to know where it comes from. That's not important. It's just that I have it. Because fuck you, I can take it with me. Like, for some reason, the right side...
No one owes you a goddamn thing is right-wing ideology.
Yeah. And also, I can take it with me, because who the fuck... I'm already trying to... we're 55, or 56, I'm trying to get rid of stuff. I'm already thinking about, I don't need a lot of shit around, but these people are the ones who just want to pile the shit as high around them as they can.
You're 55.
Oh, I thought I was 56. I always age old up a year. I always age myself up a year.
That's a very strange personality trait.
I know,
I would say flaw. It's a flaw.
Well, it's also a torture mechanism, because if the goons ever come for me, it's gonna be like, you guys have no idea what you're in for, because I'm gonna tell you every fucking thing that I know, and it ain't pretty.
And in the case of your age, it's not true.
Well, and that's just setting the table for the information that will be forthcoming.
It's like, as they strap you down, you'll be like, now the advantage is mine.
I will tell you the longest number in the world. Are you ready?
You are so going to regret this. This is definitely going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. I believe that, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just love the David Johansen line. Don't you start me talking, because I'll tell everything I know.
That is a great line. Yeah, and he has good cadence when he says it too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. No, I mean, look, I think that we don't want to give. I think it's implied from how, from this dialogue, that this is a very inspiring and thought-provoking hour, and so therefore, just for that reason alone, it's worth watching. But I think maybe we should talk about sort of how it, what is done right and what is not done right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, okay, so Adam Curtis uses this very heavy-handed editorial style. It's very effective. You could, spend a week just watching Adam Curtis BBC documentaries, and you would feel so brainwashed by the end of it. I feel like his stuff has this brainwash effect on you.
Is that him narrating?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, his voice is very like, you're just like, yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, you just have to believe everything. And like you said, he doesn't support the things. And this is one of the things that kills me about the lacking media that we suffer from. All these rhetorical question leads. Will Julian Assange be indicted by the U.S.? Or, does it matter that don't ask me. You're the writer. It's your job to prove why. You have to state your case, and you have to prove your case. And I feel like he gets it right there. He gets the ball right where it should be, but then he just doesn't give you the underpinnings.
Yeah, I think maybe that's because it's the British style. Like, like the Brits figure if it's on the Beeb, it doesn't need to be, it's been vetted and it's true. It's like, they're not like Fox News broadcasting bullshit that is absolutely proved demonstrably untrue.
Here's what I would like the thing to have been. I would have liked to have been a half hour on how we got into this mess and a half hour on how we can get out of it. Because that's what that's what this kind of thing calls for. It's like, okay, you beat me up, now I feel like shit because Ayn Rand and this asshole Greenspan and Clinton and all these other people metastasized into this fucking thing that is now taken over all of our lives. So yeah, do you have a solution? I want to hear.
He doesn't.
No, and that's the thing.
I don't think he does. Even though it wasn't the brief of this thing to do it.
I know, but you could do it in a very civilized way where you said, okay, let's just say, for example, that what if George Orwell's 1984 had been the screed that was taken up as the literature of informing ideology. This is what it's a rigorous task. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you're gonna go ahead and skewer Ayn Rand, and heaven knows the critics at the time, I don't know that any of them were on her side. Everybody thought she was full of shit.
That speaks highly of them. And
it does. It's a little surprising. And so
that interview with Mike Wallace, by the way, reminds us of how much also we've lost in media. I mean, 60 Minutes was on for decades. And I think that's a pre-60 Minutes Mike Wallace interview. I mean, these Mike Wallace and those guys, they go back to like the 50s, early 50s, even the 40s. I think, what's his name? Andy Rooney was like on the beaches at Normandy during D-Day. And you see the intelligent way in which he interviews Ayn Rand, and he really like toys with her like a cat with a mouse.
Yes, he does.
And he's as intelligent as she is, which is saying a great deal.
It is.
And then you see late period Mike Wallace, it wasn't the same. It just wasn't. It was lazy. It was arrogant. It was fat. It was boring.
Right.
I mean, journalism. That's just an aside.
So anyway, how do we steer the ship is the point. Because here's what I see. If a ship is
assuming we agree, do we even agree with the thesis? I mean, I'm not sure I do agree with the thesis, because you know what it leaves out? It leaves out 320 million Americans. I mean, this is not like, I mean, Alan Greenspan was a very important guy, and the president of the United States is a very powerful man.
Well,
but they don't decide everything.
Well, he talks about the World Bank considerably in this video, and that is
but people still went along with this shit.
Look, people are sheep. This is why democracy is such a fallacy that can be used however the speaker wants to use it, because it plays automatically to the lowest common denominator. And then when you split that in half by having the red and the blue team, you're going to be able to call the shots forever. You're never going to have to worry about a threat from beneath, from the working class, because not only are they being brainwashed.
Never. I would not say never, but for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we have to get down to brass tacks about what do we do to turn the ship, because all it takes is if you can focus people's minds a few degrees to the left, all of a sudden the ship is starting to head to that beacon, and you see a lot of things just falling off, a lot of things shifting, and I feel like that's where we're at with things like Beto O'Rourke and these people?
Well, I think I think every political and economic and social system contains within it from the moment of its creation, founding mythologies and assumptions that are ultimately going to crumble and eventually will lead to the seeds of its own destruction. And American capitalism, as we know it in 2018, is no exception. There's going to be there's certain mythologies that are just going to fall apart and just are going to stop functioning and stop working. And the real question is not that. The question is, when and how will it stop working, and what happens after that? And what terrifies me is less the idea that they might not collapse anytime soon than the concept that we might end up with a more authoritarian system to follow it than something that improves humanity's lot.
Okay, well, all right. So the episode is called "All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace." So a lot of what this documentary is about how we are all run by machines and how the people that are running the machines.
We should talk about the Pong thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk about the Pong thing.
Okay, so he talks about I forget the technologist who arranged this soiree. But this guy had this experiment.
There were probably 500, 800 people in the audience.
Yeah, it looks like it was a ballroom of some sort at a hotel, perhaps. And they entered they sat down for dinner.
And they sat down in the auditorium.
In the auditorium, and they all had a paddle, a red paddle or a blue paddle, I believe.
Red or green, depending on how you turned it. One side was red, one side was green.
So like a stoplight, and then they discovered. It was Pong on the screen
in front of them,
and they didn't tell the organizers were actually not organizers. They didn't say anything. They didn't say, if you do this or that will happen. They didn't say, oh, check out your paddle and see if it does anything. Pick up your paddle. They didn't say anything, and then the people just on their own noticed the paddles and started fooling around with them and noticed that they could influence the movement of the Pong ball on the screen, and then after a while, they noticed that they could work toward their side communally without even talking to each other, but just sort of like a collective hive mind, in the same way that a flock of birds knows to pivot in a certain direction.
So it's this utopic mechanism that they imagined. They imagined, right? Exactly, groupthink, and
like the Borg.
And I would say things like the Me Too movement. You see where this hive mind has this power, and that's kind of an ideal epitome of what these people think.
Social media.
So how society can run itself. You won't need governments. You don't need any of this, because the hive mind will control everything.
Interconnected by machines, and of course and now the internet,
which ironically is the enemy of free will and free thought, because you can't have, if your idea doesn't fit into the mold of the hive mind, it's going to be rejected, and so are you. So
they've turned us all into a giant transistor.
So it's the exact opposite of what Ayn Rand was promulgating, that you would have people that would be completely free entities, individual thinkers who would be able to do and think. To do
great art. And in her case, great architecture.
And so because of Ayn Rand's faulty foundation, that so much of our American political structure is built upon, and our technological structure is built upon, we will all reap the rewards. Oh no! Sorry, the other thing. Suffer the damages.
We will reap the whirlwind.
Yeah,
that's the
one.
biblical phrase.
That's the one.
Yeah, the thing is, it is like a bunch of, but you could also just say it really comes down to a bunch of pencil-necked geeks. If you've been to college, you know that computer nerds, engineers, they tend to be right-wingers. They tend not to care about their fellow human beings, and they are often not, and I'm generalizing here. I mean, obviously there's left-wing engineers and scientists, but science is very right-wing. And a lot of those people worship at the altar of this kind of dumb, I guess if the Bible is the good book, this is the bad book. The Fountainhead.
So I just want to say, because there's been so many fires in California, and I'm about to go to California on vacation and see a lot of that area, when you see somebody in need, the first human instinct that you have is to help that person. It's not
if you're sane.
Yeah, it's not to go rifle through their house while it's burning to see if you can find some cash that you can steal. That's not the impulse that humanity has, and so it is I find it so twisted and ugly and just disgusting that because the right have been able to use these tactics like calling everything communism, they create these ghost structures, these blank villainous ideas, so that everyone feels bad. And yeah, guess what? If you see somebody burning up in their car and you don't go to help them, you're gonna feel bad. But you know what leftist ideology says? You that's part of your burden too, and you're gonna help that person, and you're gonna feel better.
Right.
So there you go.
All right. So there we go.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you are Imperial Porter fan, the Flying Dog Gonzo Imperial Porter is yummy, and it'll hit you.
Very delish.
It'll hit you. That 9.2. Thank you all for listening. Please visit colesmithy.com where you can contribute to the Grande Bouffe and help keep the lights on for as little as $5 a month or a munch.
We prefer more.
You might want a munch. 10, 20, 35,
$1,000 a month.
$1,000 a month.
You got it. Just spend it.
Yeah. It's just money. It's just cash. This is the share economy. That's what we're all about. Please remember to turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie. And thanks to Ted Rall.
Thank you, Cole.